Welcome to the Grow with the Flow podcast, the ultimate destination for all things D2C and e-commerce. I'm Dove Karp and my co-host is Dave Silverman. And today's episode is brought to you by Chargeflow, the leading chargeback automation solution for e-commerce merchants. Now, imagine a world where chargebacks are no longer a headache, where you can focus on growing your business while Chargeflow handles the rest. With cutting-edge AI technology, industry-leading win rates, and unparalleled accuracy, Chargeflow is revolutionizing the way merchants manage disputes and recover lost revenue. The best part? Chargeflow only charges for recovered revenue. No monthly fees, no long-term contracts, no hidden costs, just instant ROI. Stay tuned as we dive into the latest trends, success stories, and expert advice to help you scale your store and take your e-commerce business to the next level. Whether you're just starting out or looking to optimize your operations, Grow with the Flow and Chargeflow have you covered. Remember, when it comes to chargebacks, let Chargeflow do the heavy lifting so you can focus on what matters most, growing your e-commerce business. So give Chargeflow a try today. It's easy to get started and there is no risk or obligation. So without further ado, let's get started. So welcome to the Grow with the Flow podcast. I am so happy today to welcome Jeremy Horowitz. Jeremy is the managing partner at Because Ventures. He's been instrumental in the e-commerce space, nurturing startups from their nascent stages through Series A funding. His decade-long experience in scaling the fastest-growing Shopify Plus brands and apps has culminated in his current venture of acquiring D2C brands valued between $10 million to $100 million and SaaS apps ranging from $1 million to $10 million in top-line revenue. Jeremy's approach is intelligent, concise, and informative, and I really look forward to our discussion today. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you, Dove. I'll have to see if I can live up to that. That was one hell of an introduction.
Well, you already did, bro. This is what you did.
Yeah. The problem is we've spoken before, but only briefly, and you've already proven this to be the case. So, all right, let's hop right in, but with a clarification question, right? So you have this Let's Buy a Biz, and you have Because Ventures, and I'm just wondering, are you looking to purchase businesses and run them? Because I saw that in your kind of LinkedIn, or invest? Are they two separate things? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think it'd probably also be helpful to take a quick step back and really talk about what we're doing at Because Ventures. So after doing VC style investments for about 3 years, my partner and I actually decided to rerun our ecom playbook, where we acquire early e-commerce businesses, scale them up, and then either acquire or build SaaS businesses that basically, what's the e-com brand's problem? What can we solve with software? And then can we scale that software out to other businesses while we grow that core business? So Because Ventures right now is a search fund, which basically means a private equity fund where we're matchmaking on every deal. So like when we find a brand we really want to acquire, we go to our financial sources of capital, inject capital, acquire that business. And then my partner and I actually go and operate the business until it's scaled to the point where someone else essentially backfills us. Either the founders can grow and scale with the business, or we bring in an operator. So to answer your question, it's yes and or both, because everyone loves to talk about the venture capital side of the industry, and that's been so hot for the past 10 years. I feel like nobody really breaks down the structure of how private equity deals get done in the space, which is actually how consumer businesses outside of a weird 5-year window actually get funding in this space. So I guess let's spend the first 5 minutes of the podcast going to really deep financial theory about investing. Traditional private equity is looking at 3 major vehicles of what they will call investing. 100% buyouts. So we just come in and we acquire the entire business and we own, operate the whole thing. Then there's majority controlled, which is usually somewhere between 50 and 70%. So this is really used when a private equity wants to come in and be very involved, but the founders stay on, or some sort of key component, like you keep them on for a couple of years as a longer transitionary period. And then there's what are they're called minority stakes, and they're kind of used sometimes now as growth rounds because the market hasn't quite reset yet, evaluations and expectations. But basically we'll come in at sub 50%, 49, somewhere usually between 30 and 40%, where we'll buy a meaningful piece of the business, but the founder still retain control, or the previous owner still retain control. And so when you're at the 80, 100% side, it's usually called acquiring a business. And when you're at that like 40 to 60% side, it's usually considered investing in a business.
Okay, gotcha. Great. And we're going to go much deeper into that in a few minutes from now. But right now I want to just talk about, Yeah, it's kind of the beginnings. Like, how did we get here? I looked a little bit into your story, right? I saw in college that you were quite entrepreneurial. I saw there was a lot of internships that you were involved with, and many other things. If you could just tell me, you started this entrepreneurial journey, maybe it was even before college, but now you're doing investing. It seems like you had a lot, you were involved in product and marketing and so on and so forth. Can you just explain a little bit about where you started and how you got here?
Yeah, sure. If we want to go all the way back, my dad set me up with like a car washing business when I was 8 years old to make money because he's so annoyed every time he took me to the toy store that I would always ask for everything in there. And he's like, you're going to make your own money. It was like neighbors, friends, family, like very, very small.
Yeah,
but that's kind of like my version of a lemonade stand. How I actually got into e-commerce was I flipped video game systems and music instruments on Craigslist back in the day. So when I wanted to upgrade from one game system to another or buy a new video game, I would basically sell whatever I had on Craigslist. Like literally had to figure out like how much pricing and all these other things. And as a teenager, thinking back now, it's pretty funny. Like as a teenager, I'd meet an adult or stranger in public and do a cash exchange. Like that was back in the days like before.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Nothing shady.
Like
no problem.
PayPal. Yeah, like I'm like whatever, 12, 13, probably a little bit older than that. But like and literally taking cash where like somebody came to the house and like I kind of became known to my family. Like whenever they wanted to sell an old TV, I would list on Craigslist and someone would literally just show up to a van at either like my parents or my own aunt and uncle's house, take the TV, we take the cash, and then I'd help them like move the new thing in.
Pushing product.
Fast forwarding like
you do what you got to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
you got to make that paper, as they say.
And so fast forwarding like my actual professional career in college, I had this like weird existential freak out where like before that, I think what you were referencing, I'd done a lot of Fortune 500 internships. So I had interned for Turner Broadcasting, which is like TNT, TBS in the States, worked in their media sales division, and then did a stint in Time Warner Cable's like new technology marketing team. Mm-hmm. And then just had this accidental freak out. I was like, I don't want to go to a big corporation. I don't want to kind of follow that career path. So I got very involved in the entrepreneurship program at the University of Maryland.
Wait, 1 second. What made you not want to get involved in the corporate world? Because I'll tell you, from my background, I didn't want to be involved in business at all. I was much more philanthropic. I wanted to be involved in nonprofits and community outreach and that type of thing. And I hated everything about business, at least the idea of it. I didn't do it fully, but I didn't want to be involved at all. And after about 10 years, I started dabbling in it and I kind of fell in love with it. Maybe it had to do with maturity, maybe whatever. But what was it about your experience originally in kind of corporate America that you're like, yeah, this ain't for me. This ain't it?
Pace, politics. And I really love to come up with a third P to make that like a sweet alliteration. But I think the defining moment for me was I interned directly for like the head of what is basically like the people who come up with the marketing sponsorships for basketball. So like one of the things we did was like the Gatorade halftime break sponsored by Gatorade, and there's like a little mini activation, and our team was responsible for coming up with the idea that was then pitched to the sponsor to then be sold for multi-million-dollar, they buy a bunch of commercials, they get that thing as a part of it. We work with their team. And this was right around the time where fantasy sports, streaming, and the internet kind of infiltrating content were all coming to an intersection. And so I spent like 2 weeks at the end of this internship, put together this massive proposal about how people should be able to see their fantasy stats while they're watching a game on NBA or whatever, pick your sport. Turner had a bunch of sports, NASCAR, baseball, all those things at the time. And I was like, it'll keep people more engaged. They'll watch it because they want to launch their teams. And the guy was like, that's a 5-year project. It'll cost us millions of dollars. And you will never, you won't even be here by the time that this thing will get built. And then he was like, you probably should go look into like finding a developer and testing to build this thing yourself and like learn more about the technology. And that was my first internship. And then I did another one with Time Warner Cable where I was even like in their innovation department. Like this was we were testing out what eventually would become, well, it never actually got built, it never actually got deployed, but eventually kind of what Roku and Apple TV stepped into. And I was, even in that, I was like, these things take 9 months to go from a conversation of an idea to a conversation about planning for a planning of an idea to a conversation about building the plan to the actual plan being built. And I don't really have, patience is not a virtue that I have. And so I realized just from all those experiences that like super small, super early, where I could have my hands really on like what is going on, was kind of really what I thrive in the best and also motivates me the most. And so you'll probably see like a string throughout my career from there is very, very small orgs. Like I think the largest org I've worked for since those Fortune 500 companies is maybe 300 to 400 people. Like everything else has been very, very early, get things off the ground, hit that like growth curve very early and scale them out to the point where then you bring on the people who can go from that 100 to 1,000. Like I'm very good in that 10 to 100 range. 0 to 1 I've done with, I'm not the best at, but I can do it. 1 to 100 is really my sweet spot. And then 100 to 1,000, 10,000 is, happy to pass that on to the next person.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's really you don't like the red tape. You like kind of being able to have an idea, let's deploy it, let's get this thing moving. And, I definitely appreciate that. As an entrepreneurial person too, I'm an employee technically now, but I specifically like working at places where they give you the opportunity to kind of put your own stamp on it. And it sounds like that's kind of the trajectory that you're coming from.
Yeah, exactly. I also like you can see some of the projects we work on, you can see a feedback loop in a couple hours, right? If I was still working at a Fortune 500 company, a feedback loop is probably 2 quarters. And so just like the speed of being able to say, like, I have an idea, I put it into the world, what happens next? Yeah. That's also why I love LinkedIn. Like I can just throw an idea, I can vomit an idea out there, hopefully clean it up so it's presentable. And then either people love it or hate it. And I know that sometimes within minutes, but usually within a couple hours. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you went from corporate America. Now you're moving forward in your journey, an entrepreneurial journey. So keep on moving forward with that process. Where are we holding?
So super fast forward for the rest of this. Failed college startup where we were taking University of Psychology research and trying to turn it into an HR SaaS tool. Basically tests incoming college graduates who are the high potential candidates that you want to not only hire, but then invest and nurture in. Did biz dev marketing fundraising for that. Got signed some huge clients like AOL and some other Fortune 500s. Product team never delivered the product, had a big falling out with my co-founders. And then essentially from there, really just got into e-com. So from there, I started to work for Magento extensions and really, really early, actually Shopify migrations. Then jumped to the brand side, managed e-com for a couple of very, very high growth Shopify Plus apps. Then a whole bunch of startups and investments and other things in this all time frame. Then about 4 or 5 years ago, jumped back to the SaaS side. So I ran partnerships and marketing at a BI and analytics tool called Dacity, which now does data ETL warehousing infrastructure. Ran a partnership marketing team and ecosystem marketing team at Gorgeous for a couple of years. And then through that entire time frame also, when I was on the SaaS side, was when we were doing all of the investing. So did early stage VC investing into both Shopify plus brands and tech. Then about a year ago, we switched focuses to now run the search fund.
Okay, so what inspired you most about getting involved with e-commerce and that you stuck with it, right? Corporate wasn't your thing, but this e-com thing seems to be where you're at. What do you love most about it?
I fell ass backwards into it like everybody else does. What I love most about it, I actually went to school because I wanted to study human psychology. So my favorite classes in college were social psych. My parents said, if we're sending you to an out-of-state school, University of Maryland, you're graduating with a real degree. And apparently going on the 12-year psych course was not the appropriate answer to that
As
question.
a guy who did that, I did the degree in psychology. I did a master's in marriage and family therapy. I spent 6+ years of my life involved in that. And now I do sales. So you made the right choice.
We'll see. I would say, thinking back on it, this is a complete tangent. Thinking back on it now, I think nobody should actually ever get a marketing degree. I think a marketing degree was probably one of the biggest wastes of my parents' money. And I had fun in college, but from an education perspective, probably one of the biggest wastes of my time. I think you should get a psychology degree with general business practices. I think that would have actually been I basically, I'm a weird person. My freshman year of college, I took a couple economics classes and got really into game theory. So I'm a big game theory nerd. We could spend a 2-hour podcast talking about all the different types of game theory and how to play those games and then
that'll be the follow-up.
Yeah, maybe that's a new podcast.
Yeah, 2.0.
And so Daniel Kahneman is probably one of the best actually helpful. Everybody uses what he took from social psychology and game theory, and now it's basically the foundation of all work if you're in digital, like anything brand, SaaS side, services side. And like that's what I really wanted to do. And e-commerce is just an enormous game of scientifically testing human psychology. And so one of my favorite examples of this is every time that my wife shops on a website, she will spend 4 times as much money as she would otherwise if free shipping is offered. And I constantly have to explain to her, the free shipping threshold doesn't matter at all, but it's one of the most fascinating examples of human psychology. And so most of the time I spent on the brand side of e-commerce, I did a lot of that. Like, how can we test different offers, different incentives, my favorite thing is to create a bundle. That is the most interesting example in e-commerce of how to completely master the financial and math side of it, and also the human psychology and the value side of what we do. And
can you give like a practical example of how you deployed that? Because I think that's very, very fascinating about how you go through the eyes of psychology and you kind of overlay it into the world of D2C e-commerce and how you, I don't want to say manipulate. That's a terrible, terrible way of saying, but how do you encourage?
You leverage,
people?
You leverage people's biases.
Yes, exactly.
Happy to. So one of the biggest tests we ran while I was at Lumi was we sold Kim Kardashian's favorite selfie case. So this was where I spent most of my time on the brand side. So if you think about it, it's a OtterBox with light rails on either side. That's basically photo quality studio. So if you go out at night, take a selfie, take pictures of your food, friends, whatever, turn the lights on, you basically have a photo shoot in your purse. And that was really what we were selling. So $70 phone case, 50% gross margins, roughly about $30 to $40 CACs, because this was still in the good days pre-iOS where Facebook was still reasonable. So we were operating at about a 10-ish% net income margin. We factor all of those things in. We made a ring that cost us maybe $2. And I mean something like literally you just slap on the back of your phone case, you stick your finger through it, and it's kind of like a pop socket. It was easy to hold your phone. We would retail that ring for $20 on the website. It's right, insanely high gross margins. Super low value product. Right, $70 phone case. I'm basically just trying to convince someone to add a $20 ring to their case. What we found is we could go incredibly aggressively with the discount. So you add that phone case to your cart. We had we were like very early into the Ajax sliding cart phase. You would get a crazy offer. If you add this ring to your cart now, you buy black, get that black, it all matches. We're going to give you, I think we eventually netted at like 30%, but we test everything from 10 to 50% off. You're going to get 30% off this ring, incredible discount. It's insane value. It raised our total store's profit by 15%.
Wow.
And so the beauty of it, and like for all the brands out there who are listening to this, one thing everybody needs to do, increase your AOV, find a cheap product that you offer with 80% gross margins, get every single person who buys your hero product to buy that product with it. Like make sure it matches, don't sell somebody, I don't know, t-shirt and then try to get them to buy shoes. Like it has to make sense. But, t-shirt to dad hat or underwear and socks. Like every brand kind of has this, and we can do other categories if you guys want to play this game. Like every category has this, every business.
So you would say every single product has another product that you can add in order to kind of create this extra added psychological value?
Or it's this more of the same product. That's the other use case, right? Like coffee is a little bit harder, but just buy 4 bags, get somebody an incredible offer to buy 3 bags of coffee instead of 1.
Bulk. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we can play this game. It's actually very fun. But every brand, client, every brand I've ever worked with always says, no, it's impossible. It makes no sense. It's not worth it. We test it and they're like, oh my God, like this is basically around the funding that we just unlocked in cash flow and
What's that
profitability.
called? What's that called in psychological bias? Is there a name for this?
So it's 3 things. So 1, you're playing into people's loss aversion of I'm giving you this thing that and scarcity. So that's the key is loss aversion and scarcity are the best decision-making framework. Because most of what I spend my time on is marketing and sales. All marketing and sales is just helping people make a decision that's hopefully beneficial to you, right? If you're good at spending your dollars, that's basically what your job is. And so what you're doing is you're giving someone a gift and then immediately taking it away if they don't take action. And so that urgency and that scarcity because also the important part of that, I think once you get loss aversion is the big insight. It's more painful if I take $5 from you than if I give you $5.
So that's so interesting. So it's kind of like, here, you can have this. This is sitting in your pocket. It's going to cost a little bit more, but well, if you don't, we're going to have to take it away. And you're saying that pain that a person feels is more painful than the extra added couple bucks that they would put towards acquiring it.
Exactly. And that's the decision you want someone to have, is me separating with those couple extra dollars is nothing compared to the pain of me not having this other thing.
I have such a good example for that. When we travel and you'll be in Thailand and you're shopping, you're buying stuff for home and different souvenirs. And then there's this one and whatever, I'm not going to get it. And then you get home and you're like, I should have got it. And it was only like $5. And now that pain and the ruminating around it is next week. And then it pops up here and there. I should have bought it. Yeah, I definitely understand how that plays out, where someone's like, I could get this ring for another $10, and now I'm not going to get it. And then they get the phone, and every time they use their phone, they're like, I could have just put my finger in there.
Yeah, it doesn't hold right. See, I'm not manipulating people. I'm helping them avoid regret.
In essence, you're right. You're righteous man.
Yeah, exactly. The other big part of why I also recommend your higher price hero product and a cheaper product is another Kahneman principle called anchoring. Humans will always anchor to the first bigger number that they see. Mm-hmm. So, right? If I'm going to sell you something, I don't ever want to say, here's a $20 item, and then you can also buy this $50 item, because then the $50 item is perceived as significantly more expensive. Versus if it's, hey, for our example, here's the $70 item, you can tack on $10 or $15, whatever, $18, whatever it ended up being. Then it was, oh, this is such an incredible deal, because I was going to spend $70. What is spending 74 or whatever that is, $88? Yeah. Also, what has been awesome to see in the space since that time is people have really optimized the cart, where you add the ring, you get free shipping. And going back to my wife's example before, right? She could have spent $4 on shipping for a $70 phone case. Let's just ignore tax to make the math simple and just say she would spend $75 to buy just the phone and pay for shipping. If I can get her to spend $88 and get free shipping and a ring, our profits have just exploded, because shipping on that stuff was super cheap and is all super light. So our profits went up significantly, especially when you're taking that CAC is the same for both, right? I got to spend $30 to $40 to get you to buy no matter what. Mm-hmm. But if I can get you to spend $88 instead of $75, even with a couple bucks in shipping, my profits now went from, I'm going to make math super simple here, 35, right? On a 50%, 30, let's just call it a $30 CAC. My contribution margin would have been $5 of just buying the phone. Now, let's say 88, still, it's even a little bit better because the ring had 80% of gross margins, but only 50, but let's just keep it even simple. And let's just say it's the same $40, let's just say it's, right, it'd be $44, eat a couple dollars in shipping, take the $30 out. Now we're making, let's say, like $14.
Mm-hmm. So you went from like
$44 minus 30. So now my profit to pay for, team, inventory, yada, 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 went from $5 to $14.
Do you ever advertise just that loss? Well, I won't call it loss leader. You ever advertise just the ring to bring them into the page? Because as you mentioned, they'll come in, they'll buy the ring, or they'll add to cart, get the free shipping, and then they'll buy the meat. Yeah.
So what you're talking about is called the tripwire. I can't tell you, it's very funny. Also just a microcosm of what ecom was at this time back in like 2016 to 2018. Entire businesses were actually built on this principle of what we call free plus shipping offers, or $1 plus shipping offers. So you would buy this thing for $1, cover shipping, which was always crazy inflated, like $8 or $10 when shipping cost $5 at the time. And then you would just get this really aggressive upsell flow. So, hey, this is another this is called kind of the foot in the door policy, or foot in the door game theory. I guess we're probably going to spend our whole time today talking about game theory. Not about requirements.
Well, look, that might be the title of this episode, because it literally is. You're saying e-commerce is kind of a game, and that's what you really enjoy about it. And it's trying to take the psychology and understand how do I get this person on the other end to do ultimately the action that I would like for them to do, which is hopefully beneficial to them as well.
Yes. Also, for anybody who's dealing with the mental health issues of e-commerce or taking it too seriously, if you treat it as a game, also you tend to perform much better and are much better shape. That was a big insight I had over the years. So this is called foot in the door theory. So basically, and also reciprocity. I give you a gift. Now you feel compelled to give me something back. Also, the foot in the door piece is now I have your email. So you're going to, and this was why eventually Facebook kind of quasi banned this practice, but you're just going to get an email until you buy it's classic of we email you until you buy, die, or unsubscribe. And so that was another thing that became really popular. Hopefully not. Hopefully just
yeah. Sorry. Here we go. Carried away.
And so we didn't do it. It had to do with a couple components of it really had to do more with the operations of the business. We had way more phone cases to move than rings. And we intentionally, the rings were invented because I went to the product team and I was like, I need a product that fits this playbook. I need something that's super cheap, that's super easy to attach. Because also, if you're coming to the selfie case brand, ooh, that's fun.
I think that's you do 2 thumbs up, you get that.
Is that a warning? We're halfway through or not?
There's let's see if we catch this.
For everybody who's listening, I just stuck my thumbs up and fireworks went off in my background.
Wow. All right. Riverside's got
also it was a competitive positioning point. If you were coming to the rings were kind of undifferentiated, to be honest. There was no great feature. It wasn't indestructible steel or an adhesive that had some crazy feature. But people came to us because they wanted that photo quality experience. So it probably would have driven CAC, the incremental CAC would have been higher. It would have been it wouldn't have cost me $30 to sell a $20 item, but my delta would have been much worse because it would have cost me $15 or $20 to sell a $20 item, or even for free.
Yeah, because you'd be kind of forcing it. The hero item, that's the reason that people were coming in. They wanted that hero.
Yeah.
So I guess in general, yeah.
I was going to say, and also we were sitting on a pile of phone cases and 10% of that level of inventory in rings. It wasn't a financial lever for the business, but it is something I've seen a lot of brands run. And I know brands today are still completely run off of tripwires. That's the only way that they acquire new customers, is a super, super aggressive free or entry level offer. And then it usually works a lot better with consumables, high repeat purchase products, where you're going to come, people are going to come back over and over and over again. We sold a phone case that was supposed to last until you upgraded your phone. So it was very much needed to optimize profit on that order.
Do you ever lose money on that? Say okay, I'll bring you in for the ring. I'm buying it for $1. I'll sell it for 50 cents because I'm confident that you'll buy other things on my site.
I've seen other brands do it. That brand, we didn't do it because also, if you just think about that specific customer use case, if you're buying a ring, you already have a phone case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now we still have to convince you, you put also it's kind of a single use product, right? If you put an adhesive on a phone case, I now got to convince, if you're going to buy a new phone case, that was a nice part about that product also. You got to buy a new ring when you get a new phone case, because you can't really rip it off and put it back on another phone case.
All right. So we're already getting into it. So in Because Ventures, right, or Let's Buy Biz, this private equity kind of method that we're utilizing, how involved are you in these portfolio companies beyond the investment, and specifically what areas are you focusing on?
Yeah, so heavily involved, basically my day job in addition to my other 2 day jobs, Because Ventures and Let's Buy Biz. What I focus, so how my partner and I usually split it is I'm the go-to-market function and he's the operations function. So I'm doing things like working with the marketing team, working with the e-com team. How are we structuring the growth? How are we structuring marketing budgets? How are we structuring partnerships? How can we just put more profitable top line into the business. And then my partner is the one doing, building warehouse software and managing inventory and all of those other components. Because that's really, I think we love to talk about e-com and make it super complicated. There's two functions in e-com. You have the team that's responsible for selling the product and the team that's responsible for making and managing like how much inventory you got. And that's, I'm going to oversimplify it, but that's kind of it.
Yeah.
And that's all you really got to master. And then if you keep your cash in the bank, everything else usually works out pretty well.
And so when you first come in, right, and how do you audit it? How do you do some triage? How do you know, okay, these are the areas that we really need to start focusing on first, and then potentially how do you build it up from there? Do you have a system, a formula that you go to? Is it more by feel? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so there's two answers to your question. So for the first part, to acquire a business, you have to just go through an incredible amount of diligence in general, and then when we actually go to acquire, an incredible amount of due diligence. Mm-hmm. Why my partner and I are very big on focusing on e-commerce businesses specifically is the financial components of how an e-commerce business operates are also very tied to how it operates. So like if a business has a gross margin problem, I know I've either got to go fix discounting, fix price point, fix AOV, fix the components that make up gross margin, right? Or it's a COGS problem and we got to go work with the manufacturers of how do we get this thing made for less expensive, or how do we sell different products? Mm-hmm. So when you go through the due diligence, like, we have a 180 point due diligence checklist that also then flips into a playbook of essentially like, what is the due diligence point? And then what's our operational playbook? So every business that we look at, it just goes through that list. What is it doing well? Can we throw more fuel on that fire? What is it not doing well? Is that an area of opportunity where we can step in and really move the needle on? And then that's also how, usually by the time that we acquire a business, we know that, okay, these are the problems. These are the big wins. This is the first 90 days of, hair on fire problems. Go fix these things. Where are the couple big bets that we're going to make that we're pretty confident will, get us to that place where we hopefully every acquisition is basically, can we scale this to the point where it's in a good place while we fix the things so it meets up, that we can actually go successfully grow the business?
Do you have that? Do you have that? Was it 180 or 100? Do you have that somewhere? That might be an amazing piece of content. I'm just saying, even as a lead magnet, something, because I'm just thinking about like, if I had my own e-commerce business, it's not really, we're not flying. This Grow with the Flow podcast is all about getting you to scale up and move to the next level. Sometimes you're just so involved in the business. I don't even know where to start. Like I got so many things going on, but if you have a list of like these 180 checkpoints that like you can look through, I think it would be a great reflective tool for brands to look at in general. And then obviously, they'll just come to you because they're going to be like, I ain't going through all this. I'm just going to hire Jeremy, or, he'll acquire us and take over.
Yeah. We have this conversation internally all the time. We're planning on it. I just need to put more. So that's also like, that's the let's buy a biz part of all of this is my philosophy is kind of like, let's just put the philosophy, the education points out there to attract the right business for our model. Because we have a very, very narrow thesis. Like we're not an aggregator. We're not trying to just roll up 100 brands. So we're planning on doing it. There's two parts. One, it's just too much information, right? Like in the brand example you just talked about, they don't probably need to know 50% of it. Like, we're looking at their incorporation documents and what insurance they have and their intellectual property. And, like, that's not stuff that everybody will need to really focus on. So like, how do we trim it down so it's actually operationally
You'll
useful
redact it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then
just
the other
put those
part
black
is
bars.
Also, well, it'll probably be a 90-point checklist versus a 180-point checklist. The other part is also like that component of it's just, nobody has long attention spans anymore. No founder wants to go take on 180 things to do. So the other part is like, how do we make it like
digestible?
Like, how do we just like make it digestible? Sorry, what I'm looking for. Like, how do we make it digestible so it's like hey, I'm looking to improve the finances of my business. Here's what acquirers will typically look for, and here's what benchmarks and other things that would be helpful. Versus like, that analysis paralysis of, oh my God, I got to go figure out these 7 things across legal, marketing, operations, inventory, just that completely overwhelming aspect.
Yeah, 180 points is a lot.
Fine, 173. Okay.
If you could break it down to like one a day, which you'd post on your social media platforms, get a newsletter where
the
you
marketing guy going.
dig into that a little deeper, and then a year out, first of all, that'll bring you the lead generation you're looking for now, because someone who's following you comes across one of the points that's relevant to them, they'll automatically reach out. You're a subject matter expert. But end of the year, you had all of these points. You released one every other day. That's 360. You completed a year, and now you released the book.
Yeah. Well, it's really a spreadsheet. But that is interesting, like actually going to explain what it all means. That's a really good idea.
We had a good
why
idea.
people care.
That was great.
I'll publish my services to y'all afterwards.
Yeah. All right. So what are you seeing? All right. Now you're in it. You're in this company. What are you seeing in the market, especially for DTC brands, that they really should be capitalizing on at the moment?
Should be capitalizing on at the moment. Okay. A couple of things. First, everyone's way too reliant on Meta. So basically how all brands get acquired in the e-commerce space is we're going to give you a multiple of your trailing 12 months of earnings. It could be called EBITDA, net income, SDE. But how profitable were you at the end of all the line items in your business at the end of that time frame? One place where your multiple will get reduced is what's called channel dependency. So if 90% of your revenue comes from Meta, if 90% of your revenue comes from one sales channel, you're going to get a lower multiple than a business that has a much more even mix, because as everybody's been experiencing, basically for the first half of 2024, one change in one platform, if you're too over-reliant, can cripple your business. And I'm not going to go write you a massive check to then have the business be crippled. So that's the first one. And I mean, everybody's testing everything. I don't know if there's any silver bullet here. I would say that maybe that's part two, is stop chasing silver bullets. Like, I think everybody, and I guess we can relate this back to the Meta part, everybody's way, way, way too over-reliant on attribution. I think attribution doesn't even really matter. That's a whole other podcast and a whole other conversation.
That's very surprising. Because don't you need to know where it's coming from?
Okay, so I used to sell attribution software, so we can spend a whole other probably podcast on how
this is number 3. We got a lot of follow-ups coming up. Game theory and now attribution.
When you get a guy like Jeremy who knows what he's talking about, you take him for 5 podcasts. You know what I'm saying?
We're gonna have a series with you.
I used to run a podcast. Yeah, I've done it. I've bought it. I've sold it. It's not real. There's a whole bunch of ways that you can build it up to be. Really, my problem is you can make it whatever you want it to be. There's no empirical truth. Versus, I guess we're going to go on a complete tangent here, but this is one of my big hot takes. A P&L is all the metrics you need to run a proper marketing program. If you know what your gross margin, if you know what your top line sales are, if you know what your net sales are, right? Discounts, returns, refunds. If you know what your COGS are, which give you your gross margins, you know what your marketing budget as a percentage of sales is, right? Mm-hmm. On Amazon, they call this tacos. But how much should I spend in marketing to drive a sale? It's basically the inversion of ROAS, but just a percentage, right? Most brands will have 15% of their marketing budget. 15% of their sales is their marketing budget. So I'm going to spend, if I make $1 million this year, I'm going to spend $150,000 on marketing. And that's all you need to know. Because if you spend money on Meta and you spend money on TikTok and you spend money on Google and you run SEO, guess what? People are going to see your Meta ad, search for you, look for your stuff on TikTok, and then eventually come by. It's not they clicked this, they saw that, and they just purchased, and it's 50-50, and that's all garbage. If they need to sign up for your email, to get an email, to then see what the offer is, at the end of the day, anybody in the go-to-market function, your job is just to make that sale. What's more important is, okay, when people see Meta, what happens next? Then when they search for me, what happens next? And really mastering that arc, because the real problem you're just trying to solve for, real problem that you're trying to solve for is you're just going to overspend in a bunch of channels, and then your contribution margin's just destroyed. That's the actual problem that attribution is trying to solve. So if you just solve it from first principles, just don't overspend your marketing budget, and always ensure that your marketing budget is spent responsibly. Is always spent intelligently so that you hit the sales number that you need to hit to justify the marketing budget. ROAS, attribution, all the stuff is just trying to give people a toolkit to do that. But if you just know, hey, here's what my funnel looks like, here's what my conversion ratios matter. It shouldn't matter whether the traffic sources come from blah, 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 and yada, yada, yada. Just know what's driving traffic to your site. Oh my God, this is gonna be a 20-minute conversation. And then just know hey, these things are the string of experiences that, no two users are going to go A, B, C, D exactly the same. But usually there's about 4 major buckets I've seen with every brand that they're all pretty similar when you look at any tool to track this.
Yeah. You want to say something?
It just goes back to the attribution. I was going to ask, and now you kind of answered that the attribution would matter less, as you were saying, because the attribution is the final click and not the entire journey. It's the converting click, correct?
I've done stuff. I've seen the most complicated attribution systems in the world where we were giving proportional credit to every step of the journey. Like this would get 2%, that would get 5%, that would get 10%. You know what we did at the end of it? We just looked back at, what was driving the most to the site, what was driving the most at the bottom of the site, and just did more of that.
Right. 100%. All right. So you're giving so many nuggets, and we're seeing, and we mentioned that it's all across LinkedIn, and maybe this 180-day challenge that Dave told you. You've built quite a nice following from there. I love putting out content. I'm a big content guy myself. And I'm wondering if you have advice for, let's say, somebody who is an employee, right? Who does want to build their own personal brand, but I also want to build up the company that I'm with. What type of content would you say to put out? What format? I notice you have a little bit of personal details that you put in once in a while into your content. Do you have a formula when you create content? How would you utilize that in order to kind of build your brand?
Got it. Okay. So I got invited on just to give you the full playbook on how to build a brand, because we're going to see Dove, the LinkedIn influencer, come up pretty soon. So I think it'd be more helpful to give the narrative of actually why I started. So back in, 2019, I was running the Messenger Mastermind podcast. It was all like super nerdy marketing tips for e-commerce brands to grow. And we were just trying to grow the podcast. So I would literally just take what were the insights from the podcast, how could I push them out through LinkedIn to then get people to listen more to the podcast. Didn't really work out. I've come to realize over 5 years of doing this now that nobody cares about my tactics or my insights. Everybody just wants the hot takes and the ludicrous things that I say.
Interesting.
Let's go.
So where, people like really get heated over my M&A ideas when I say things like Microsoft should buy Shopify. So what really took off was actually I got a full-time, when I joined the team at Dacity, when I started running partnerships, I started creating I changed all my LinkedIn content to start talking about to partner managers, right? My job was to source partner managers to then bring referrals in to the company. So all of my content eventually evolved to become very partner related, very e-com related, things that were helpful to a partner manager, so that I was always top of mind, so that I could source partner managers. And at the time when I joined Dacity, their only partnerships were with Google and Shopify. By the time I left, they had 150 partner program against all the top tech and all the top.
So you didn't speak about your company. You spoke about your job, I guess, of what you were doing or who you were targeting.
I wish I had done the build in public play, because that would have been so easy if I had just done, hey, on Monday, I talked to these 5 partner people and this was my big insight. And here's how to run it. That would have been so much smarter. I recommend everybody do that. If you literally just, if you're at a fast growing, big name, reputable company, everybody just wants to know what it's like behind the scenes. How'd you get there? What are you doing? What makes you successful? What are you learning? What do they need to learn to be like you? I'm an insane person. And I instead created content that I thought would be engaging to them. Like I more have created helpful. My big concept here is all the social content, and this is really Dave Gerhardt's ideas. It should all be edutational. It should be entertaining and educational at the same time. And when you can cross those 2 barriers, that's where you can like really hook people. And so I was like, no, it wasn't really more of like, this is me, this is what I'm doing as a partner manager. I was more thinking of like, what are interesting things that partner managers would want to talk about? And almost like a lot of my content is now written under like the, if I want to have a conversation with someone else in the company, I'm going to send them Jeremy's post instead of like saying a bunch of things. And that's kind of how and now it's a little bit more fun and like entertaining, especially with the crazy ideas. But that's actually how it started. And then, candidly, a lot of this is I just have a spreadsheet where I track the performance of every single LinkedIn post I've ever done. And I just are constantly testing. So I categorize everything. So like, if it was the partner manager example, it'd be like partnerships. And then if it's the M&A ideas, literally we have M&A ideas now, personal updates, I have personal P&L. People are loving my whole liquidating my 401k story right now. And so I literally just track the performance of all of those things and then just compare what's the most successful. I think I've gone through about 100 or 200 different content types over the years. And then now just have core pillars that are like, okay, this is what my audience really resonates with. This is the type of content that they really like. And then I basically just honed in and focused on that now. I've made a career decision long ago that like e-com was going to be my entire career focus. So that's also made it very easier for me that like all of my content across all of the 5 years and thousands of posts and now probably almost, 7 or 8 million views has all been e-com related, just different areas and different focuses of that.
Gotcha. So if we can do like a thought exercise, let's say you have somebody selling a marketing platform, right?
Oh, I thought you were gonna say chargeback.
Let's say you have somebody who's encouraging people.
In sales and a chargeback recovery platform.
Yeah. What type of content would you? Actually, I like that. I like that analogy that you're trying to bring. Let's say there is somebody who's putting out content in the world of chargebacks, right? Like,
could that be?
I don't know. How would somebody go about that? Right? Because they're targeting, let's say, finance professionals or operations or, something along those lines. I'm talking about somebody they're in one field, but then they're targeting other people with other professions in another. You're saying, would you write, oh, these are the best things for customer experience? Or would you talk about sales? Would you talk about the product? How would you clarify that?
Yeah. So if I was Dove, what I would do is...
I'm just theoretically, just in theory.
Hypothetically.
Yeah.
What I would do is more of like, okay, clearly define your audience, which it sounds like you have. What content are they already consuming? Mm-hmm. And so LinkedIn allows you to do this pretty easily. Like you can go, if you know a couple of like who your target audience would be, you can go and see who they're following and then just filter who are the largest people in that audience that they're already following, and you can just go basically clone their content or mirror their content, right? There's a great book called Still Like an Artist, right? Like don't literally copy and paste it, but what's something of inspiration that you can take? And then I would just start down that lane of like, what are things that they're interested in and what are things that are interesting? And then I think the other thing would be, what are things that are interesting to you that you think they would be interested in as well? Mm-hmm. So how Let's Buy a Biz started was I was writing private equity memos, and like we have to write these. Basically, when you submit a deal to get acquired, you have to write this deal memo, and it's basically an executive summary of a company with just tailored to that. And I was like, oh, this is really like one. I'm putting a lot of work into this. Two, it's really interesting. What could I take out of this that would be helpful for brand founders, who was my audience on LinkedIn, and give that to them, and basically take like I'm super like. Because also if you're close enough to your own customer, right? Like what's something that you're interested in that they would be interested in as well? And you're basically just trying to amass a list of what are things that they're interested in and how can I fill those slots? And so there's going to be the entertaining stuff. There's going to be the educational stuff. And then the last part is just like a classic business principle. People buy from people that they know, like, and trust.
Yep.
And there's only so much that someone can really like you if you never share anything about yourself. And so you have to, right? Like one of my other like lines is everybody obsesses of personalization as like a front end experience, but half of personalization is just sharing your personality, right? It's not always getting you the right name and thing at the right time. It's also like, as from a brand, like we would tell stories about what we did that day or what's going on behind the scenes, or like, us as having a personality. And I think that's a super, super important component of personalizing people's experiences.
All right. We only have about maybe 2 questions left because I know we're taking care of your time. So what would you consider to make a brand that makes a brand investable? What do you look for in that company, in that brand? What are your criteria? Like what excites you?
So we have a whole doc on this. I would say this is very, very much a mirror of our more philosophy on how to build a business. So 50% of sales comes from D2C, like their primary, usually Shopify. But we like seeing that they have other revenue in other channels and the potential to grow those channels. We specifically look for a very small catalog. Like we don't do a lot of apparel just because so much cash sits in a business that has thousands of SKUs. So we're looking for small, what I would say weird businesses. like you kind of know them when you see them and you're chuckling. So I know that you know what I'm talking about, but like, right. Like we don't want the 15th fast fashion or the 100th yoga pants business. Like we're looking for, or the, whatever, the 1,000th clean beauty brand. Like we're looking for that non-obvious business, but has a super niche loyal following.
Like a
Lumi's
liquid death type thing?
Yeah. I cannot tell you how much my partner wanted to invest in them. My partner was like literally must have been one of the first 1,000 Liquid Death customers. Like,
wow.
That's Liquid Death is a perfect example of like when they've launched, it was the dumbest concept ever.
Yeah.
Why would I buy water out of like it had a little bit of a sustainability angle because they were kind of going after plastic water bottles. Like that was kind of the death to plastic part of Liquid Death. But it was kind of the dumbest thing of like, okay, I'm going to buy water because they play heavy metal music while looking at, mountains and springs and images. But yeah, like a non-obvious, but like has that super loyal, obsessive cult like following behind it. And then, we have a bunch of like specifics and other variables, but those like the really, really core things. And then obviously like the one question I always ask my partner before we decide if we're really going to move forward and like make an offer, do due diligence is one, is this something that we want to spend the next 10 years of our life on? And the qualification for that question is always, it's either a hell yes or it's a no. And that's the last component, right? Is like, there are certain businesses that just don't excite us and it's like not interesting. It's not something that I want to spend 10 years obsessing about. And so it's got to have like, that's that last major component that's crucial for us before we make a move.
Could I ask a personal question?
Sure.
If not, who is your partner? How did you meet them?
Happy to share both. Partner's name is David Gitman. His favorite line is he worked at eBay before he could legally drink. And the best way to describe him in a short little nugget there. I actually pitched him one of my very, very earliest startup ideas as an investor. And it didn't end up working out, but we stayed in touch. And then we just kept kicking around ideas long enough until we decided to work together.
Very cool.
That's awesome. All right. So, to keep it a little more personal and inspirational, right? You've been on such an entrepreneurial journey. What is the greatest lesson or lessons that you've learned that you can pass forward to somebody? Let's say maybe they're stuck with where they're at. They don't know. What keeps you motivated and keeps you moving that you can share?
Okay. You asked like 4 questions in there, so I'll try to address all.
Yeah, answer them in 3 words. Go.
Yeah, local maxima theory is actually probably the best answer to your question. Okay, so for the most helpful advice I give to people, 3 things. The first one is you're going to grossly overestimate the impact you're going to have and grossly underestimate the impact of just compounding growth and time in the game. And that's also like how I just believe like all of my investments principles. The second one, which is also super crucial to that, is the 80-20 rule. You're going to have to do 10,000 things. 80% of what you actually will get value out of will come from 20% of your efforts. Really important qualification on that is you can 80-20 that as well. So you can 80-20 the 80-20 rule, where it comes down to 1% of your efforts will generate 50% of output. The super crucial thing that everybody forgets is the inversion of that. 20% of your efforts will also generate 80% of your costs, 80% of your wastes, 80% of your components. And so if you really want to move swiftly through something, you obviously need to have the data and the feedback loop. But you really, really need to methodically know and maniacally obsess over the 20% of stuff that you know you're absolutely going to crush over. And that is like protect at all costs, no possible, you give no ground there. And then just maniacally cut out the 20% of costs that are generating, the 20% efforts that are generating the outlier of your costs. And I think really people don't like to do that part, but I call it my sandpaper list. But essentially, what's the stuff that I'm just going to like buffer out of my life? And I've extended this now into my personal life, my investing, all of these components. And it's astounding the impact that just splitting those two, like focusing on those 2 specific focuses will have. The third thing to answer your piece of advice is local maxima theory. So if you look through my LinkedIn profile, it probably looks like an absolute maze of ping pong ding dong all around and not a lot of long stints. Local maxima theory is basically you're focused on just climbing the current mountain that you're on, that by the time that you summit it, you think that you summited the tallest mountain in the world. And when you actually look up, you see that there's a huge mountain range around you, and you've just spent all your time, energy, resources, and focuses summiting basically the smallest opportunity. People will also kind of call this just like fishing in the largest sea possible. And really, like, basically every quarter now, I really try to take a step back. Some people call this like the disrupt yourself framework. But am I climbing the most valuable mountain? Is this the one to keep focusing on? And a lesson that I've learned now, which I wish I'd known in my 20s, is instead of stopping something, is there somewhere where I can change my focus or adjust slightly so I can keep that compounding growth and keep that compounding time in the game, but focus on a much, much, much bigger mountain to summit? Because if I'm gonna have a headache, I'd much rather have a $4,000 headache than a $40 headache.
1,000%. I think. Wow, you literally were just talking to me. I appreciate that. Seriously.
Yes,
Yeah, we're still talking about your content here.
Wait. That was very meta because you were talking to me, but you were like talking to me. You know what I mean? Jeremy, I really appreciate all of your time. You had so many great points. Where can people find you? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, so I've got 9 million things going on. So the easiest place, if you want all of this, is my LinkedIn, which is just Jeremy Horowitz, Horowitz on LinkedIn. From there, I post twice a day content now, hopefully helpful stuff for ecom related. I've got a newsletter, a website that you can all get from there. The investment fund, search fund, everything is all the easiest place to get to.
So follow you on LinkedIn. All right. So thank you everybody for listening to the Grow with the Flow podcast. We really look forward to bringing you practical advice. I hope you're probably going to have to listen to this on like half speed with the amount of knowledge that was
the same for myself.
I was trying to listen at half speed myself right now. And everything that you need to do or you need to grow your DTC brand. And as always, we're here at Chargeflow for all your chargeback needs. You can go to chargeflow.io, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks for having me.